Let us pray. The Lord has been the people's guide for past 300 years. With him still on the people's side, we have no doubts or fears. Bless every Barbadian and those who reside in this land. Send your Holy Spirit on our leaders as we think of your holy word. Give them the prudence of Solomon in their deliberations. May we all heed your word. If my people who call upon my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, will forgive their sin and heal their land. So may all be done this day for your honor and glory through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This Honourable Chamber is now in session. Good morning, Honourable members, all the visitors who are here with us this morning.
Announcement by Your Honour.
Minutes. Honourable
Madam
member.
Acting Speaker, I beg to move that the minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, 29th of October, 2024 be deferred.
I haven't heard you, sorry.
Beg to move that the minutes for the meeting of Tuesday, 29th of November be deferred. Sorry, October be deferred.
The question is that these minutes of October
29th.
the 29th be deferred. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Messages from Her Excellency the President. Petitions, papers.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm commanded to lay Barbados's medium-term fiscal framework 2025-2026 to 2027-2028.
Government notices. Private members' notices. Notice of questions. Reports from select committees. First reading of bills. Statements by ministers. Congratulatory and or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notice of motions for adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of starting orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
question is that the standing orders so mentioned be suspended. Are all members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Government business is the order of the day.
Government's business is now the order of the day.
Madam Deputy Speaker, order number 10 on the order paper. In the name of the Honourable Minister for People, Elder Affairs and People's Empowerment, to resume the debate on the passing of a resolution that the Parliament of Barbados approve the national policy for improving the lives of persons with disabilities and the 2023 National Report of the National Advisory Committee to guide the establishment of a commission for improving the lives of persons with disabilities.
Honourable members, we shall continue to proceed with that debate. Honourable member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. Good morning to all. I'll never forget the day that I heard the phrase, disability is not inability. It jolted me because as an ordinary Barbadian living in Barbados at that time, that consciousness of the capacities of persons with disability was never in the forefront of our minds as citizens. And there arose in Barbados during that time of our country's immaturity with regard to this matter, a number of people who recognized that it was not all right, it was not okay for a country to ignore the persons who were challenged or to do just the minimum for their benefit. But that a country, if it is going to be inclusive, must make every effort to include and provide that which is needed in order to allow them to fully participate to the fullest extent of their ability. And we got there because in this chamber, there are a number of people who raised their voices, who spoke about their experiences, who spoke about their convictions, and challenged us to think differently, challenged us to behave differently, and to provide for those persons who have a disability, but certainly do not have inability. And so the maturing of our country has led to a reforming of what we do and how we do. And therefore this morning, I want to be able to rise and speak on behalf not only of myself, but the Honourable Member for St. Philip West, concerning what the Ministry of Education has been doing in regard to making sure that we provide an appropriate and effective platform for those who live with disability to find their abilities and therefore maximize their potential. And therefore, I feel very honored in having the opportunity to speak this morning about the charge that we take so seriously, that we must ensure a bright future for all, and all means our special needs citizens. And in order to honor and fulfill this mandate, it required us to do three things. The first thing that needed to occur was that we had to have better and improved identification of those who have challenges, and to make that identification as early as possible in the lives of our children, so that from early we could make the necessary adjustments and provisions to ensure their fullest development. Late identification led to frustration for those children, damage to their psyche, and neglect of their needs. And ma'am, it was the impact of that on the lives of our children was nothing short of being cruel. And so what we have been doing over the years and have intensified since we've come to government is to improve assessment of our children as early as possible. And therefore in 2023, for example, we were able to do site testing for some 1,600 children. For hearing, there were 3,000 children in our school system who were screened. And out of that screening, we were able to make 483 referrals, children that we know will have the ability to ensure that we build a pathway that works for them and helps them to be as successful as possible in their lives. We also, since 2018, made special efforts to accelerate how we dealt with children who suffer with autism. And so every year since then, we've been able to add an additional 35 children to be assessed, but there is still a waiting list that we are hoping to reduce as quickly as possible. And what this assessment allows us to do is to be able to ensure that we know the population that we have to cater to and to make the necessary changes and make the necessary provisions. So, for example, the Ministry of Education is evaluating various assistive technology to determine which would be needed to meet the needs of our special children and to enable the individual student to learn. And our plan is that those assistive devices will be provided to each student as needed. And I really welcome that, because by doing so, we're saying to them, you are valued and you are part of our society, a part and vital part of our family. So with the early identification, it makes it easier in the Ministry of Education to do the necessary planning. And we therefore look then at the changes now that had to be made on the second leg in helping our people with disabilities. And that is to change and transform the teaching abilities of our instructors to ensure that they are skilled and resourced persons who are specially taught to teach our special needs children. This is important, otherwise our children will struggle in that learning environment. And so a consultancy was set up to allow us to implement a pilot. This pilot will be executed and is in process at 5 treatment schools. The idea is that we would employ the special education services provided to ascertain how does it work, to do the necessary needs assessment, to develop an appropriate treatment plan. And then, after implementing that pilot and assessing the results, we would be able then to identify what are the best practices that best work for our children with special needs and look to spread them to all schools. And one of the elements that will come out of this, and the principals and teachers have been trained therein, is individualized education plans. That if we don't develop a plan that is specific to each child, we will not be able to help them to maximize that potential. And that plan will guide all of the educators who engage that child within that school system. And part of what that will help us do is to be able to establish clear routines that are suited to those children, to be able to develop appropriate student goals that are appropriate for each child. And as well, teachers will be trained in positive behavior management within that setting, within the school. And so a lot of training, Madam Deputy Speaker, has been undertaken in the Ministry of Education through Urdiston and other resources to start that training of teachers in special education. Urdiston itself and its tutors are also being trained in special education, so that we have the best and latest techniques to work with our children, and that the tutors are empowered then to develop a second generation of teachers who will be able to carry through our plans for our children. Teachers as well have been stepping forward and putting their hands up and saying, I want to be trained in special needs education. And what that tells me is that the heart of people in Barbados is changing, and our teachers are demonstrating that change by wanting to volunteer to specially teach this special needs group. And so Erdiston just this year graduated some 23 teachers who were trained in special needs training. We've also put 123 teachers through literacy training so that they are able to develop the skills to help special needs people to acquire the literacy skills necessary for living. Early childhood training for 28 teachers has also been undertaken, and this will be helpful in both the nursery and the primary schools. We have some 50 teachers who will complete their training in teaching autistic children in December. Now, we've had such a major shortage of teachers with that particular specialty, and therefore we were unable to meet the needs of our autistic children. And so with 50 teachers trained and will graduate in December, we are hopeful then of having a cadre of teachers who can help us to meet the needs of our people. Now, dyslexia is a very common experience among persons who are challenged with education. And for a very long time, dyslexia was not diagnosed and was not dealt with. The end result was that those children were treated as dunces, bad behave, can't learn, and damaged because there was no understanding within the school system to recognize the problem, understand how to deal with the problem, and then help those children to become as successful as many dyslexics around the world who got the support they needed were able to achieve. And so we have some additional teachers who are being trained in teaching those persons with dyslexia, and this is important to our fight to include all of our children, regardless of what their needs are, to ensure that they are taken care of within our system. And we believe that this will make a difference. It will make the school environment supportive, caring, loving, yet at the same time effective. This will make a tremendous difference to parents who struggle with the education of their children, who struggle with managing the behavior of their children, as they too may be challenged for lack of knowledge as to how to appropriately deal with their special needs child. And what we're hopeful of is that by providing in the schools appropriately trained persons and people who can engage with parents as well, that we will be able to bring a much better environment for our children. And I want to sincerely thank the Ministry of Education officials who have gone all out to make these changes, prepare the resources, and implement these plans to ensure that we have appropriate teaching within the schools. So early detection, early identification of the problem, making sure that we have developed the teachers to be able to do the appropriate teaching, and the provision of equipment is important to enable learning in the school. And therefore, the third thing we have to deal with is the infrastructure. How do we make the necessary changes to our buildings so that they're accessible, easy to navigate, and that our classrooms are set up in a way that would be productive for learning, especially for our special needs children. And so there are 15 inclusionary schools that are going to have infrastructural development to allow them to better facilitate the needs of our special needs children. Between 2022 to 2024, Belize was accommodated to allow it to be an inclusionary school. Eagle Hall Primary, Milton Lynch, St. Christopher's. What we recognize is that going forward, all of our schools will have to make provision for the needs of special needs children. And I'm happy to report that even yesterday, as we were planning during the estimates discussion, that our tertiary institutions too have identified what are some of the things that they need to do to ensure that tertiary education is going to be available to people who live with disabilities. And the Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic is working together with the Ministry of Youth, I think it is, and they are developing some TechVoc training that will be made available in schools for people living with disabilities. We had the wonderful experience at the graduation of the Barbados Community College just this past weekend, where one person living with disabilities was successful in achieving her certification. But what was beautiful was the outburst of celebration and clapping and standing and shouting for her as she received her certificate, because the school itself, the attitude of the students because of her presence challenged them to be caring people, supportive people. And I was deeply moved at how she was received and how she was celebrated for her success. And we want to offer her every congratulation. So I want to end by saying that if we are going to build a republic that takes care of every citizen regardless of how they present, then this is the type of work that we must do. And I am very proud and honored to be a part of a ministry that is playing such a critical role in making it possible for us to change the dynamics for people living with disabilities in this country. And we are looking forward that as the programs continue to take shape and become effective, we will see a difference in their lives, because they're able to live independently, they're able to live effectively, and to be able to enjoy life as God has given it to them. And that as a nation, our hearts would become warmer, better, and more supportive of everyone. And I want to thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the opportunity to share this progress that we have made in the Ministry of Education with regards to people living with disability.
Member? Member? Minister?
Good morning, Madam Deputy Speaker. At the outset, let me first say that I fully and completely support this policy. I think it was, as the Minister who led the debate said, it was a long time in coming, and it is something that is not only timely, but extremely important for this society that we now live in. And I look forward to when the legislation comes, I'm told, in 6 weeks from now. Madam Deputy Speaker, I often find great comfort in finding applicable passages in the good book that relate to the particular subject matter that we're dealing with today. And I searched through all of my notes, all of the stories that I could find, and the one I found most applicable to the matter today is the parable of the talents. And forgive me if I just share a few words from Matthew 25:14 to 30. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. You hear that? To each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them. He made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents and made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents here, and I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over little, and I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he who also had the 2 talents came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents here. I made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little, and I will set you over much. Enter into joy of your master. He who also had received the 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 5 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into outer darkness. In that place will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. I don't need to make a document in the House, Madam Deputy Speaker, because I'm sure that the Bible is a document of this Honourable House. Why I chose that, Madam Deputy Speaker, is because, and I don't think of talents here as money as it is in the parable. I think of talents as abilities, talents for music, talents for investing, talents for building. And I think every single person has a talent. Every single person. Every able person, every person that may have a disability. And I agree with the Honourable Member for St. James South that disability is not inability. And people often spend half of their life trying to find what their talent is and then putting it to good use for all mankind. Just think, Madam Deputy Speaker, how poor the world would have been if Ray Charles's parents did not recognize the talent he had, and instead of hiding that talent, gave him the nurture and necessary education to be able to perfect and improve that talent, to then be able to share his music with the world. Think of Stevie Wonder, a similar person who did not have his talent hidden, but gave an opportunity to share his music to the world. I am saying, Madam Deputy Speaker, that everybody has a talent. And people cannot be discounted for the talents that they may have. There are many, many people in this world who may be disabled in one aspect, but fully able in another. And we can think of so many people across the world who some people may look at them as being disabled, but they're highly able and highly talented, more so than most in other aspects of life. And these people must be nurtured. And we can only nurture that if we hear people, we see people, we feel people, and we give them the opportunities that they rightly deserve. And that's what this policy is about. Giving people equal opportunities to be able to make normal and to be able to make worthwhile contributions to this society. So I fully support this policy. But let me share with you a story. I have a couple stories. I'm not sure if I'm going to share all of them today, but this one I've decided I'm going to share. I'm going public with it for the first time. there was once a 5-year-old boy who was at his parents' store in Dayton Road. And like all little 5-year-old boys, he heard the ice cream truck. You know that familiar sound of the ice cream truck in the area coming around. And he runs to his mother and he says, Mom, I want to go and get ice cream. His mother says, well, I am here at the cash register. Go, Miss Lampett, would you take my son across the road to get this ice cream? So Miss Lampett says, of course, I will take him across to get the ice cream. So she takes the little boy across. They buy the ice cream. That was at that time, you know, those big ice cream trucks, not the open back ones. They, you know, the one that said at the back of it, mind that child. It wasn't always there. It was there after this incident. So Miss Lampett took the little boy, took him across the road, and he got the ice cream. He had the ice cream, one for him, one for his little brother, in his 2 hands. So, you know, after Miss Lampett was buying hers, the little boy decided he's going back across the road. So his mother had told him, look left, look right, and across the road. Actually told him, look up and look down. He first started to look up and down, and he realized down right, so he realized you got to look left and right. He looked left, he didn't see any car come in. He looked right, you see the back of the ice cream truck. And then decided to cross the road. Little did he know that as he got past the ice cream truck, a police car was coming down the other side, hit that little boy, and knocked him backward. That little boy was me. So they ran and told my mother that I was on the ground unconscious. And they told my father he was upstairs. I'm told he put on 5 pair of pants before he could get on one. And they put me in a car, Miss Lampett's car, and took me to the hospital. And on the way to the hospital, I said, Mom, I could hear y'all, but I can't see. Because I had what was called transient cortical blindness. And it was obviously a traumatic time for my parents because they would automatically, in the space of a short space of time, be thinking, first thing, what would happen to my child if he is permanently blind? And second, what happens to the whole family? Because a lot of people don't accept and appreciate that having a disabled person in a family has an effect on the whole family. And luckily for me, my blindness was transient, and I was able to regain my sight. But of course I don't remember all of it. It's a lot of it as well that my parents would have told me over the years. In fact, some people say that it may have been damaged, even the back of my head, probably why I have this flat back of head now. I don't know. But it was a traumatic time for all of us. I spent many days in the hospital, and eventually I was able to regain my sight. But what was interesting after that was how they would then relate to me the trauma that they felt and what they had imagined would happen to both me and to the family unit if that disability had persisted. So I take this policy very, very seriously. And you know, it's interesting, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the same little boy that had transient blindness would grow up to be an oral and maxillofacial surgeon who used hand-eye coordination to work on very, very small surgical fields. And I thought it would be a good segue to answer something that the minister spoke about, that in his discussions with members of the disabled community, had people who were trying to get dental care and found that they had to get sedated more often than not. And I do accept and I understand, but I want to give a little bit from the practitioner's side of things, so that we understand from the disabled side, but as a former practitioner of 30 years experience, I want to give you a little idea from the practitioner side of things. Now, first thing, when a practitioner has to see a patient who may have a disability, and there are ranges of disabilities, it is not every disabled person, obviously, that would need sedated. A practitioner has to make a decision based on the level of the disability, the ability for the person to stay still, their own ability to deal with that person, the environment and the surroundings that they may have to offer that procedure in, and as well as the technical difficulty of the particular procedure. And I'll give you an example. Imagine trying to do a surgical procedure on something as big as a 5-cent piece, while that 5-cent piece is moving left and right. Extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. Not saying that it can't be done, but can it be done to the best of your ability? Maybe not. So therefore, a practitioner has to make a decision based on all of those things, and then say to themselves, if I cannot do this procedure to the best of my ability, what can I do to augment so that I can then offer the best service for the patient? And that is what makes that decision. Now, it's not every person that has to be sedated. But if, in your judgment as a practitioner, you either do not think you have the ability, or you have the ability but don't have the setup, or you have the ability and have the setup but cannot contain how the person will move, then you have to go to the next stage. So practitioners do not go straight, disabled person, we can sedate. That's not how it's done. They go through a series of questions to be able to come to a final treatment plan. And I would respect any practitioner's decision when they suggest a disabled, to sedate a disabled person because of many, many factors. And it's not all factors that contend. So I wanted to make that point, and I think it's important that we make that point for all people. The second story, which I believe I've shared in this chamber before, is something, another thing that I live with every day. It has to do with It has to do with a young lady who lived in Bonnets. I live with it every day, Madam Deputy Speaker. Who was wheelchair bound because she had mobility challenges. And at some point, she got pregnant. I had twin girls, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I, in my wisdom, recognized when I was the Minister of Housing that there was a disabled unit at Valerie, and it had been vacant for a little while. I, in my wisdom, got the National Housing Corporation to allot that unit to that young girl because she had the two children. I believe she was in the newspaper at one point, stating that because of the upstairs of the unit in Bonnet, she was unable to get upstairs and had to crawl to get upstairs and all of that. So we got her that unit, and she moved into that unit. Within, I think it was about 6 months, 7 months of moving into that unit, she took her own life. I have always been hard on myself, thinking, you know, sometimes you try to do good. My name is Duguid. Sometimes you try to do good, but are you doing good? Did I do the right thing to encourage her to move to a unit where she didn't have the family support, where she didn't have her sisters and her brothers and her mother there to help her to raise the children, to help her with her daily needs? Did I do the right thing to put her in a situation where she had no bills to pay for electricity and these kinds of things and whatnot to maintain a household, when where she was previously she didn't, because it was all part of the family? Is it the pressures of having to do these things as a disabled person that caused her to take that drastic step? All of these things I question myself about. And you know, for somebody who makes decisions every day, many that change people's lives, many people that I meet, many people that I will never meet, but it still changes their lives. I often have to step back and think to myself, is this the right way? Is this the right thing? Is it that my decision will disadvantage somebody to the point that they would want to take that kind of step? And it's something, it's a guilt, because I think I've taken it on, that I live with every day. And I can't pass Valerie, and I can't pass her family's house in Bonnets and not see the image of her in my eyesight. So, a disability policy so that we hear people, we feel people, we see people, we understand people, and we enable all people of all walks of life, because we're all important. We all have a part to play in this life. You know, the other thing I wanted to speak about is, and I heard several people speak about it, in planning buildings for disabled people. Now I'm going to take off my hat as MP and put on my hat as Minister for Planning. This is obviously still a document of the House. This is the Barbados Physical Development Plan of October of 2023. And at page 29, and I'm going to go through it, communities and housing. And this is what guides the Planning Development Department for all buildings across Barbados. It says the government will promote inclusive settlements that are safe, healthy, accessible, affordable, resilient, and sustainable, and foster prosperity and quality of life for all, in accordance with the objectives of the Barbados government. The government will implement the policies of housing policy paper being undertaken by the ministry, and the government will promote settlements that provide a variety of types of housing within communities, affordable housing options, a mix of uses with amenities and services located within walking distance of residences, locations for public transport stops, transfer points, or transport terminals, infrastructure for active transportation, such as sidewalks, trails, and shared use paths, and accessibility for people with disabilities. It is here already. appropriate amounts of open and landscape space designed to meet the community's needs, and locations for community gardens and farmers markets. And it goes on further at 22. The government will promote the development of age-friendly, and I know, Madam Deputy Speaker, you would be very pleased to hear that, age-friendly, sustainable, inclusive, and accessible communities, and reduce residential overcrowding, encouraging seniors housing to locate its centers and mixed-use corridors close to amenities and services to meet daily needs, promoting the development of new housing, again, which is fully accessible to people with disabilities, continuing to require that new developments and significant renovations in public spaces be accessible, and encouraging the retrofitting of existing communities to improve accessibility, as well as requiring installation of lighting in public spaces, and planning for the provision of 30,000 units of affordable housing over the next 10 to 30 years. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government is not only talking the talk, we are walking the walk. We are looking to provide for people with disabilities, providing with the policy, and in 6 weeks' time, bring in the act so that all of those people with disabilities, be it permanent disabilities or what I had, a temporary disability, be provided for throughout the length and breadth of this country that we so love. With those few words, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm obliged.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Our member for St. John.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise today to support this resolution because almost like every other piece that come to this chamber, members of my constituency will benefit from the passage of this resolution. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, sorry. I want to say to you that there are 3 persons from the other side that are supposed to be shadowing my ministry. And it is very, very evident to me that the description of shadowing is very, very apt because they're total darkness as it relates to what my ministry is doing to assist persons with disability in this country. And I want to start by sharing an experience that I had last week, Monday, at my I Am conference. And it is unfortunate that in 2024, there are persons in Barbados who still frown and look down on persons with disability. And I had to deal with it face up because at the end of my mom's life, she had an amputation. So I am familiar with the process. But on day 1 last week, Monday, one of the first speakers at the conference was a young lady called Miss Blackman, a young final year student with a physical disability. And some of the stories that she shared with us at that conference, I know it really, really touched every single one in the room. And one of the things that she mentioned, one of the things that she spoke about was the fact that an individual on this island would have said to her, and note that she's doing a medical degree, but she's already sitting on a degree. And she said someone told her, how can you help someone when you can't even help yourself? And that is happening in this country in 2024. And she went on to speak about her struggles in terms of access to different areas that were rectified. But it was a clear indication to me that we need to wake up on this island in relation to how we treat the people with disability. And I have a pet peeve because the Honourable Member for St. Michael South would have mentioned that it is not too big a problem in some areas, but we still have this situation where able-bodied people in this island are parking in disabled spots. And I believe that touring is going to take a long time, so I'm suggesting, Minister, that we invest in some clamps, and if you want to park in a disability parking lot, we bring some clamps and you stay there for a period of 6 hours, because that is where you want to park. So we need to introduce the clamping of some of these vehicles. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to share a little bit in terms of what is happening within my ministry from the youth perspective for those 3 individuals who remain in the dark. We have been able this year to facilitate 2 camps, one at Anthill and one at the Disabilities Unit, and we would have incorporated those camps into our program to ensure that we get some good coming from those camps. Not that they were lacking before, but when I toured the camps and I saw some of the pieces that were produced, it was absolutely amazing. And we continue to embrace those 2 camps with the expectation that we will expand at some point in time. We have the Youth Entrepreneurship Program, and one of the proactive things that we have done in the ministry is to ensure that we have signers in the class for those persons who are engaging in self-employment, for those persons who are entrepreneurs. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Digital Media Program, this is another initiative from my ministry, and we have persons with disability who are sourcing the training under that particular program. And I met a parent whose son was involved, and I said to her, look, if you can find 6, 7, 8 people who are willing to have their children get involved in the process, I will put together a project at the ministry that is specific to that particular demographic. Because we cannot function in the Ministry of Sports and Youth and omit any young person who so desire to get involved in the process. This year, for the first time, it was mandated that we have a special award at the National Youth Awards for persons with disability. And that came off this year, and it will now be a staple within all of our National Youth Awards program going forward. I heard the Honourable Member from St. James North indicated that he is now doing a sign language program. And I'm not sure, but one of my daughters indicated to me, Dad, I am doing the sign language course, and she's doing this for the 2nd time because she did it in school, but now she felt there was a need to do the sign language course. And I said, but how come you're doing it again? And she said to me, because there may be a time when I have a patient who I need to speak to using sign language, and hence I will be proficient in delivering whatever it is that I need to deliver to that particular individual. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, 1,000 apologies, ma'am. One of the things that we have also done in the ministry is to ensure that we have a program as far as sports is concerned where we include persons with disability. And the infrastructure on island is such that we felt it necessary to go back and retrofit a number of our pavilions. And we would have done that at Rice's, at Greens, at Indian Ground, at Bailey's, at Briar Hall, Valerie, Lears, and the Glebe, to ensure that those persons with disability have easy access to our particular facilities. Only yesterday, Madam Deputy Speaker, I had a very productive meeting with the Barbados Blind Cricket Association at the ministry, because they're looking next year to bring 3 countries to Barbados to participate in a competition. And I felt that there was a need for me to get involved to see how best that we can assist next year in terms of making that particular tournament a reality. And the discussion was a rich discussion. One of the things that I realized is that there are only 30 active members involved in the association. And I am sure that my colleague, the Honourable Member for St. Michael South, would say to me that this should be triple. And I hope it is not a case where we have a situation on island where parents are embarrassed about having children with disabilities. I live in the constituency of St. John, and Madam Deputy, I will tell you that there is a household, because at this point in time, I can't say. There was a young lady living in the household, and I'll say to you, for the last maybe 50 years, nobody in the area would have seen that young lady. We knew that she was living in the household, but nobody saw her outside of the house. And it is unfortunate that at this time, parents would believe that they should still hide their children with disabilities and stop them from embracing all that is possible or all that is available. One of the things that I'm working on, Madam Deputy, is the fact that we need to look in sports at the 4-year cycle going forward. And I was disappointed, and I guarantee you that as long as I'm sitting in the chair as Minister of Sports, that we will no longer have one person representing us at the Paralympics. Because we had one swimmer this year who represented the country. He was able to do a PB, a personal best in the swimming. And we are putting steps in place to ensure that we have more participants, more athletes going to the Paralympics in 4 years' time. I spoke about the awards at the National Youth Awards, the National Sports Council. They also have an award, the Wesley Worrell Award for athletes and administrators. And we have, Madam Deputy Speaker, one coach who's working with the Derek Smith and the Irving Wilson School, who's there coaching young swimmers. But one of the things that I want to say here today is that there's a need that if we're going to expand and if we're going to grow the sport in Barbados, we need to have persons who are coming forward to be coaches, because it is absolutely critical that we have coaches that are able to deliver and to deliver in an effective way for all persons with disabilities. We need to have officials who can referee as it relates to the different disciplines that are involved. Right now, I think it is only cricket that is prominent within the ranks of people with disability. And we need to grow that. And we need to grow that from the very young ones. And if we're going to do that, I need to have coaches come on board to ensure and to make sure that we have the very best. I've constantly been saying in sports that if we're going to have a world-class athlete, then we need to have world-class coaches to buttress what is happening there. Our summer camps program, like I said, Mr. Speaker, is up and running. The social inclusion and equal opportunities, something that my ministry fully embrace and will continue to embrace going forward, because I understand what it is to be in a situation where we do not have persons doing things. Look, we talk about employment, and I made sure that if we're gonna talk the talk, we should walk the walk. And I have a person in my office who's working and doing fantastic work, and I'm hoping that we can get more, because I think that we need to put a quota system maybe in place in our ministries where people with disability have a set amount of jobs set aside for them. Because if we are government, I think we should run and we should lead by example, and I think that this is absolutely necessary going forward. I am looking to see how best that we can do it in the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Community Empowerment, and I think that it should be mandatory that every single ministry, there's a quota system where we can say we have 5, 6, 7, 8 persons working within the ministry. Madam Speaker, I think I have covered the areas that I wanted to in relation to what is happening in a particular disability demographic. Like I said, I fully support the bill that came from my colleague because I know that I have individuals in the constituency of St. John with disabilities, and whatever benefits will accrue from this, that they will get. So on behalf of those individuals, I want to say thank you, and Madam Speaker, I'm obliged.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. George, no?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me congratulate all those members of this lower chamber who went before me, and of course, those who will come after me. And Madam Deputy Speaker, let me recognize those persons who did the hard work to get us to this stage, members of the various bodies led by the members for St. Michael South and the member for St. James North, and those who are here in the gallery, those who have worked tirelessly to bring us to this stage, and who certainly, Madam Deputy Speaker, would ensure not only we have a national policy for improving lives of persons with disability, but Madam Deputy Speaker, would ensure that we pass the legislation in a short time frame. Madam Deputy Speaker, I, like my colleague and friend for Christchurch West, want to begin with a biblical reference, and there are two. And the member for St. James North and I, we had a conversation on this last week after his speech, and I referenced Leviticus chapter 19, verse 14, and it says, "You shall not curse the deaf or put a stumbling block before the blind, but you shall fear your God. I am the Lord." But I go further, Madam Deputy Speaker, because there are a number of biblical writings and scriptures on persons with disability and how our Heavenly Father narrated and scriptured most of these writings. And the last I will refer to, but by no means that's the last, Luke 14:12 to 14. And it says, "But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you." And Madam Deputy Speaker, my life, and I know most of us, we are not here by accident. We are not at this stage by accident. We are here by the grace of God, the Almighty, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I will go further than you, my good friend from Christchurch West, to recognize the work of our Heavenly Father, who has so crafted this environment that we can now have a policy to further the work that He started in those days, in the biblical days, to assist persons with disability. And we can go on and talk about Samson, who was blind. Zachariah was not verbal. Paul had challenges. And I can go on and on in the Bible to speak. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, that is the reference from which I will speak from this morning. Because I'm not here by accident, neither are you here by accident. Neither are the persons with disability, and I want to reference or speak to the most honorable who was the president of the Senate, and back in 2008, she's now the most honorable. This government saw it fit to reward her with the highest honor in this country. And there are many more that I can speak to, Madam Deputy Speaker. But there's also one that is dear to me, Madam Deputy Speaker. I journeyed from this country to Trinidad to support a young lady who's sitting in this chamber today, who's from that good soil, the breadbasket of St. George, and who's very dear to me. I will not put her on the spot, but she knows who she is today. And I promised her that when she reached the stage of law school, that I will come and continue to support her in her pursuit for excellence as someone, whether you want to call it blind or visually impaired, but it's probably more astute than most of us. And I speak to the consultant on disabilities and the people in the Ministry of People's Empowerment and Elder Affairs. And she was also a member of the National Advisory Committee. I want you to give this young lady a round of applause, because this young lady, Madam Deputy Speaker, I heard a member for St. John, and I can boast, member for St. John, I have walked the walk, and I have supported this young lady. I know no law, but I know the member for St. James North will want to challenge me who's closer to her, whether him or myself, but I will tell him don't go there, because many Sundays we sit in the same church and we praise our God, and I would go further to say, while we have had senators in the upper chamber, I would love to see the day when a person with disability walk those steps of Parliament to this lower chamber. Because it sends the message to the country that Barbados is right and they're ready. You use the word all-inclusive. I was going to say we embrace all, whether you are visually impaired, whatever, and the Bible speaks to it. But Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll go further, because I can speak for 2 hours, Madam Deputy Speaker. I know the member for St. Michael South, and I want you to give me a little latitude this morning, Madam Deputy Speaker. I don't always ask for it. You know, when I ask for it, I need it. My mother was a school meal server at the Ellerton Primary School. And the Ellerton Primary School opened the annex in the year, I don't want to be incorrect here this morning, but I want to give you the year that the Ellerton Primary opened the annex. I think it was in the year 1992. And Madam Deputy Speaker, those of you who know me, who know the Sutherland family from Ellerton St. George, would know that there's one house that we own in St. George, and that's in Ellerton, and that's directly next to the Ellerton Primary and next to the annex. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I have many friends who today are men and women, and who came to that house, the Sutherland house, after school and on mornings when their parents dropped them off, because my mother then became the caregiver to assist these young boys and girls who went to the special needs school. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I have lived the life of supporting and loving and caring for persons with disabilities. When I was Minister of Sports, member for St. John, not taking anything from you, you're doing an excellent job. But I recall discussing with the chairman and the director of sports to recruit a young man who came up in that annex, who is now a coach at the National Sports Council, and who is now a first division cricket coach, and who played cricket for Barbados. And I want to thank the Cook family. I don't like to call names in here. The late Paul Cook. I know the esteemed magistrate, Barbara Cook-Allen, who nurtured that young man from a tender age, who saw the need to provide support. And that's why I tell you, Barbados is a place that we can say when it comes to treating the persons with disability, we're all on the same page. And that young man is now a coach. He coaches Gladiola Cricket Club. I wouldn't call his name. I don't want to put him on the spot. But I say that to say that this government has always been embracing and supporting persons with disability. But before I get into the housing and some of the things that we have done to impact in a positive way persons with disability, I want to remind this chamber, while I recognize and applaud the most honorable, the first president in the Senate, someone with disability, I want to go back to 2003. And the deputy speaker will remember this. I shared it with my colleagues this morning, and they were, yes, I shared it with the member for St. James North to get the date, because I love to have my dates correct. And the member for St. James Central, and also the member for Christchurch West. Under Owen Seymour Arthur, we elected Mr. Ivan Linton in 2003 to the Senate. Visually impaired or blind as the opposition leader, the member for Christchurch South, who want to say, under this administration led by Owen Seymour Arthur, appointed Mr. Ivan Linton as a senator in 2003. And I go there because he's dear to me. And he was the first. He's also the uncle to the High Commissioner to Ghana, who I know very well. He's our uncle. So this government can boast. I heard the honorable member for Christchurch South associating himself with the most honorable. We too have a lot to boast about as a government, as we support and continue to support persons with disability. And I'm not speaking ill of the member for Christchurch South. I am supporting him and just letting him know that before 2008, this administration recognized the importance and the contribution of persons with disability. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me, and I'm going to drink a little bit of water here, and bear with me, because I'm getting a bit teary. I don't mind if I cry. Madam Deputy Speaker, I grew up with a grandmother from Lodge Road. I would say that I have more family in Christchurch, East Central and West Central, and I can tell the member for Christchurch, East Central and West Central, that I am probably just as popular as the two of you in Christchurch, based on the family members that I have in Christchurch. My grandmother was a janitor at the then Water Street Boys School. A stone throw away, we happened to both homes. The Sutherland home is right next to the Allerton Primary, and the Harewood home, my grandmother Pearl Harewood, the house was right next to the water box. Those of you who frequent Water Street would know the water box right next to Christchurch Boys School. I had uncles. My uncle was a driver Pemberton Harewood for Clyde Jones Funeral Home, a short man for many years. That was my uncle. But I share that to say, my grandmother raised her grandson, one of them my late uncle's son, and I am not afraid to call his name. He's still alive with a disability after 58 years. Michael Harewood. I grew up in the household, traveling from St. George to Christchurch during the summer vacations to be with them, and many weekends with my grandmother, whom a member of the former administration, and I have this in my craw. Sorry to use that phrase, but I have it in my craw. I sat on the opposition bench, and a former member for Christchurch East Central tried to insult me. When I got up on a point of order, he said to me, "You sit down, your grandmother was a janitor, she used to clean up after me." You could imagine, I went through that in this chamber. The deputy chair sat with me. The member for Christchurch, for St. James Central, rubbed me on my shoulder. But it made me stronger, you know why? Because that grandmother raised 5 children, of which the first was my mother, 82 years of age, still alive, raised 3 sons. I was the first graduate in the family, and her first son is in Canada and exceptionally well as a lecturer in economics. That janitor at the Water Street Boys School raised 5. She also raised one with disability. With a disability, he's 58 now. And what pains me, Madam Deputy Speaker, my late grandmother, I'm going to her grave tomorrow to lay some flowers with my mother. And it's ironic that today is the day that I speak to this, because I know tomorrow we will shed a few tears. My aunt will not be able to go, because why? She had to retire to cater after my uncle's death, to cater to my cousin, who's there 58 with a disability. But why I'm going there? Because, Madam Deputy Speaker, my grandmother was poor, single parent to raise 5, then to raise a grandson with a disability. We were fortunate that the 3 of us went to St. George. My dad and my mother gave up nursing and married my dad, and they took on the responsibility to have 3 boys. I'm the second. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm teary because my dear cousin, who's 58, I saw him in a house, not getting the opportunity to go to any school, because I say this without any apology, my family was shamed. They were shamed. In those days, he was born in the 60s, to expose him with that disability, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I've asked the member for the city to give way to me, because I think I had to share this morning to let you know that their families back in the 60s and the 50s, poor people who never had the opportunity or the support mechanism like what we have now as a government to assist persons with disability and to give them the life that we spoke about in Leviticus. That persons with disabilities, we should not be shamed. The only thing we should fear is God. But to give them the opportunity to live a normal life, just like you in the gallery are living today. Just like my dear friend from St. George, Allerton Gardens, is an attorney today. And I'm proud of you. But I regret the fact that my family lived with shame and never had the support then. janitor, meager wages, children not working, but having children and one with a disability, you could imagine in those days. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have lived it. I have supported him. I spend time with him. I love him. But I wish, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I could have done more for him. And that's why it pains me. That's why it brings me to tears. Because I never had the opportunity to provide that level of support for my dear cousin who's still alive today. I'm proud of this government for what we have done and we continue to do. I'm proud of my very good friend and neighbor from St. James North, who every time he speaks, if we didn't know him, we would think he has limited vocabulary because he only speaks about empowering persons with disability. I'm proud of my colleague from St. Michael South, who, Madam Deputy Speaker, has led the charge. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm proud of you. You started the journey when we came to office, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it would be remiss of me to stand here this morning and don't recognize you for the work you have done and continue to do to support persons with disability. And I know the work that you do, not only in St. Thomas, but across the length and breadth of this country. You are an honorable woman. And I would love to live to see the day that you're honored and rewarded for the good work. Not only by God, He will. He will. But I want to live the day to see that the written Bible words in Luke 14 and Leviticus 19 are passed on to you. The good book of life. And that you are rewarded. Madam Deputy Speaker, I can also go on, but I want to share with you, Madam Deputy Speaker, some of the work that the Ministry of Housing has done and we continue to do. But before I go there, let me say to you, Madam Deputy Speaker, in 2008, again, I want to thank the Prime Minister of this country. And I know most of us, we thank her. But if we have to thank her in every speech, she is worth it. Thank you for the 5 minutes, Madam Deputy Speaker. When I was given the task as Minister of Small Business and Commerce in 2018, the Prime Minister said to me, "Young man, I've given you this ministry. We have a sector in this country, the small business sector, that is dying. We in business call it a dying head." And she said to me, "I need you to inject some life and bring back some life to this sector. You will be given the funding." And she said, "The first project I want you to embark upon is to provide funding for small businesses in this country." And within, as the guys on the block would say, before you could say it, Jack Robinson, within less than 2 years before COVID, we opened the Trust Loan Division, where we offered $5,000 loan to small businesses across this country. Unprecedented in the Caribbean. But more importantly, on that day of the opening, I recall it like yesterday, Madam Deputy Speaker, the first person to sign for a loan was a person with disability, was wheelchair bound and engaging in art. And the second person to sign is sitting in our chamber today as well. And I visited him, and he recalled I spending time with him, hugging him, and telling him, you are just as powerful as the man who's walking. You're in a wheelchair, but you are just as powerful as the man who's walking and who can see and who can drive. And this young man is still a businessman today. But this government recognized that in an effort to grow this economy and to provide for all classes, that persons with disabilities should not be excluded. And I support the member here as well, the member for Christchurch West, who this is a document to the House, the Barbados Physical Development Plan Amendment at page 29, Communities and Housing, where he mentioned at bullet point number 19, the government will promote settlements that provide accessibility for persons with disability. I'm a Deputy Speaker in 2023. We opened Aline's Court as Minister of Housing, where we provide accommodation for low-income persons below the poverty, below the 2,000, earning less than 2,000 a month. You can go to White Park Road and you can see it. The member for St. James North had a special invitation, and he knows why he had that special invitation. The member for the city held my hand, and we walked hand in hand, the three of us, because we were proud. Because our policy as a government, our housing policy, clearly speaks to all public housing. 10% of housing will go to persons with disability. That's a policy initiative by this government. And I said we walk hand in hand because the three of us, we were able to usher in 2 persons, 20 units, 10% to 2. It's 2. And one of the persons are here today, is that? And I'm so proud of this government. I'm so proud of this government. We don't only talk the talk, but we walk the talk. We impact where it matters mostly. The lives of our people, whether persons with disability. And I have examples that I've shared here with you this morning to show that this government has been supportive and will continue to put the necessary legislation in place to move from strength to strength in support of persons with disability. I have no doubt about that. We are not perfect. And I can tell you that there were some comments that I received from teachers. And one of we can't always boast about the good things, but some of the things that will come on stream. And this is a special needs teacher. And she said to me that there have been several committees formed over the years to formulate an educational curriculum for special needs. I heard the member for St. James North and St. Michael South, they spoke about that. And she's asking. She knows that we are doing the work. She applauded us. That's why she messaged me. She said, I applaud your government. Tell your minister he's doing a good job. Tell Mr. Hinkson, these are the words, she didn't say MP, but Madam Deputy Speaker, she said, tell Mr. Hinkson they're doing a good job. But if they want me to help them with the educational curriculum to address persons with disabilities, then she can help. She also went on to tell me that the establishment of a sensory room attached to a certain school for students with autism which would offer stimulation and development for such students, would be grateful. Improve the technology or room with assisted devices which would aid students with communication challenges in acquiring language and augmented forms of communication. And sensory has to do with stimulation through the senses, and that is critical. So I, in my wrap-up, would want us to focus there as we transition or as we carry on the educational curriculum reform for persons with disabilities. And I may be saying things that the member for St. James North, no, he knows, and the member for St. Michael South, they know. But I will end on 2 points that I think is worthy here again in support of this government in treating with persons with disability. The Ministry of Housing and the member for St. John, I'm glad you didn't steal the thunder, you had too much to speak about. We leased 25,000 square feet of land at Sagarfi Sobers Sports Complex to the Rotary Inclusive Player Trust for recreational purposes. And this was to have children of all abilities play and learn together in an environment where their common experience make a more lasting impression than their different abilities. And this is active now. A number of children born, we know that. I experienced it, I just told you, with physical, cognitive, and sensory disabilities. And this has been on the increase. So the Rotary Exclusive Play Facility would allow those young children with disabilities to come out, which I wish my cousin at 58 had the opportunity. We have lied as a country back then. Don't mind, the Irving Wilson School was opened in the 1970s or the 1960s. And I know I have the history. I don't need to recap those things. But I want to let you know that this government, when we come to this Lord Chamber, we deal with policy and legislation that is all inclusive. And this is just about one of the areas. I spoke about the trust loans, I spoke about the housing policy. Now I just spoke about the Rotary Inclusive Play Facility. And I will end off with the lease of 837 square meters of state land, the government land, with a building at the annex of the garrison to the Autism Association of Barbados for its basic life skills program. And again, I can speak to this because I saw one of my associate family. We married 2 lovely cousins. He was here. And he's an attorney at law, a senior counsel. He was here. He has a son with autism, an autistic son. And he shares a life, just like any one of you at family functions. He's very active, hugging and cuddling and caring, because his parents were able to provide the support that my grandmother could not have provided then. And the policies that this government have implemented that we never had back in the 60s that my dear cousin could have benefited from. But this government leased these lands in 2023. And the Autism Association has a facility now, and I see the member for St. James North, he's smiling. The basic life skills program to assist these children. Madam Deputy Speaker, I too applaud, and I know the member for Christ Church West Central, he has a very good friend who is in this chamber as well, who sings, and when he sings, I dance, I jump and I dance, because he can sing and he can write. He's very lyrical, and we support you, sir. We support you, sir. And all those persons who are hearing and who are listening, who are on Zoom in the diaspora would recognize and would understand that this government continues to push the frontiers. Push the frontiers to create the policies, not only the policies, but the programs that you see came to fruition since we came to office. There are many within various ministries that we don't want to boast about it. We don't want to big up our chest because it is part of who we are as a government. We don't boast about these things. It is who we are as a government. And I can say that many of us, the member for St. James North, including myself, and the member for St. Michael Northeast, I know she has her story as well with family. We have lived the life. So when we came to public life, I can't speak for the Prime Minister, but I know, and I can tell you, she has lived the life supporting family members with disabilities like me, like I did, and like I do, and like I will do tomorrow. And like the member for St. James North, like he does daily. So we feel it even before we came to public life. And Madam Deputy Speaker, while we are not perfect and we have a lot of work to do, I don't want us to hold our head down because persons may say to us, we need to address transportation with persons with disability. Because I was in a forum, my good friend, Senator, you recall in the Zoom meeting, I told you of an experience with a young man in Niles Road, in Allerton, St. George, when you had the caucus with the Ministry of Housing. An excellent job you were doing, sir. And I congratulate you on your achievements recently from the place on the hill. Because we, and member for St. James North, I have to go back there. We made sure that persons went back to university. And persons like the senator was able to earn a first degree as a result of this government. A master's degree, sorry. Paying tuition for those young men and women who were put out of university from that said man. And I have him in my craw until I am not a bad person. I live by the Bible. But I have him in my craw, not in my mind, he's in my craw. Father, forgive him, for he knows not what he did or said about that lady who was a janitor at the then Water Street Boys School. What's the school now? Milton Lynch School. But I'm happy that the member for St. Michael South and St. James North, as well as those who are on the committee, recognize that transportation is an issue, recognize that the education curriculum is an issue, and they're working tirelessly to get these problems resolved. But why we don't want to brag nor boast, this government has a proud track record in treating with persons with disabilities. And I want us not to hold our heads down, and I want the public to know, as I wrap up, thank you for the little leverage that, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we will go from strength to strength. And Barbados will be the best place for persons with disability to live, be educated, raise a family, do business, and indeed be wholesome citizens. I thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I gave you some latitude because others did not use their full time. Thank you very much. Honourable Member for St. Andrew, please.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Firstly, I want to commend the member for St. James North and his team. I also want to commend the member for St. Michael South and his team for the work, the hard work they would have done in formulating this policy. Now, as I listened to my colleagues this morning, I too was reminded of experience from my youth when I visited a Caribbean island. Still many years ago, but it was about 15 or 20 years ago, and I've learned that if you're on the earth for 50 years, like I've been, almost 50 years, that 15 to 20 years is not that many years ago. Perhaps it would have been if it was 25 years, but at 50, it's just a few years ago. And I visited a neighboring island, and I was in the countryside. And I remember going to a house, and there was a little boy staring through the window, and the young lady that I was touring with at the time had mentioned to me that, he never comes out. And the way she said it, it was almost like that was normal. That was expected behavior, that persons with disability would never come out the house. And it was a shock for me then, but I've come to learn, and I've learned again here this morning, that perhaps that was far more commonplace in the region than any of us would like to believe. But as an adult, I have reflected over the years, even in my own community where I live, and see that there were persons who, in reflection, we would consider to be disabled, but there were no special recognition, there was no support at the level of the state, nothing was really put in place for them, and in many cases, they depended heavily on the support of their families, of their family members. Some of them were actually, that would have had spouses, and they were dependent on the spouse and so on and so forth, and its siblings for support. But I've seen through the magic of social media that across the world, there are still many disabled persons who are forced to fend for themselves in the streets, fend for themselves in their own communities. They have to work, they have to feed themselves, they have to cook, they have to do everything for themselves. Sometimes they even live alone. They're independent in that sense. But the quality of life that they are forced to live is horrible. So even though we celebrate the independence, that that you have to fend for yourself and you can be independent, the fact that you're living a quality of life that is considered subhuman is something that we would all scoff. I'm glad, I'm very glad that nothing to that extreme, certainly what I've seen with young children on the street with various degrees of disabilities, having to beg and so on and so forth. We don't have that here. I've never seen that here. And I will hope that we will never, in fact, I'm sure, as long as we have persons like the Honourable Member here for St. James North, and persons like the Honourable Member for St. James South, St. Michael South, and all of us, whether it be this particular side or the other side, I'm sure we will work to see that nothing like that ever happens in Barbados. But something that was also said that by one of the members, I believe it was the member for St. Philip North, got me to thinking, because we stand here, most of us on this side and that side, as able-bodied persons, and we sometimes think that we can other disabled people. And by other, they're not us, they're another group. But the fact of the matter is that any day, any one of us can become disabled. We work in a very high pressure, high stress work environment, many of us. There are pressures at home, there are pressures in the constituency, there are pressures in the workplace, clubs, where have you. We have different pressures all coming at us at the same time. We are constantly under the pump, many of us. And that has implications for our health. Certainly some of us perhaps struggle with hypertension. Some of us have other medical conditions, but certainly hypertension is one that a lot of us struggle with, and we all know that can lead to stroke, and strokes can lead to persons becoming disabled. So those of us who are in this job, in this work environment, know that that is a possibility that we all face.
Then we always dashing from here to there. You know, people want to see us in St. Andrew, they want to see us in St. George South, they want to see us in St. Philip North, they want to see us in St. James North, in the city. People always want to see you. And you, as a responsive MP, will try to get to as many places as you can, and you dash from here to there. You know, and you're driving, and God forbid you can get into an accident, and then you find yourself with a disability. I saw a young man the other day. I knew him from university. And he was healthy, fit. And when I saw him just recently, he was walking. He was struggling to walk. He was walking with a cane. So he's a very young man. So I know that these things, I understand he was in an accident. That these things can happen. Even if I could just use my own experience here in this regard, just a few weeks ago, I was sitting in the auditorium, sitting in the hall, getting ready to listen to the Prime Minister deliver her speech. And just like that, in a flash, literally a flash of light, a stage light fell and struck me on my head. Thing almost stunned me. I get to him, don't worry. We get into that. Almost stunned me. Could have killed me, could have crippled me. It hit me on my head, but if it hit me just a few inches lower, it could have broken my neck. I could have been disabled today, Madam Deputy Speaker. And you think that hurt me. When I was home, I just came home from the doctor where I had gone to get a CT scan to make sure that my brain wasn't damaged. I sat at my house, I could hear the member for St. Christchurch South came into this honourable place making light of an incident that could have killed me, that could have crippled me, that could have disabled me. And he came in here, the honourable member came in here making light of that. That is why, and that thing hurt me to my core. Because I could not believe a person could be that base. Could not believe it. And I sat home, I said, but look at my shame. Couldn't believe it. That a person at that level will come in here and make light, make fun of an incident that could have crippled me, that could have hurt me, could have damaged me. Call what? Call what? Never call. Talk about commiserations. I saw him last week, he didn't even look at me. Walked right past me as if I was a ghost. Never. Not a word. Caring? Boy, I tell you. That's why I'm glad that within this policy there's a push for greater awareness. And not only awareness for persons with disability, but also let people know that they're aware of people who could be, and how you can become disabled in this country, and how you should treat the people. Things that you should do and things that you should never, ever, ever think to say, regardless. Not just to score cheap political points. Because what you had was a mess, and what we had was great. You want to come in here and score cheap political points and use at my expense? No. Disgraceful. So that perhaps awareness is something that perhaps even at our level.
But he said he don't know nothing about disability.
Yeah, of course.
Member, on my side, continue, please.
Might have to get emotional. Had to get emotional. Every single one of you checking for me. And he knows my number. Because I know his. Maybe we're all in the same place. Same chat, the same group. So there's no excuse. Yep. And I assure you, if it was the reverse, if the situation was in reverse, I would have called and checked in on him. Decent, huh? You know, Deputy Speaker, Madam, at least we know.
Continue on.
And the hardest thing is to know. But there are a lot of people out there who understand that it is important to show empathy to these people that you know, I said the persons living with disability, because they already have certain barriers that restrict the development, and we should do everything in our power to remove those barriers. And it depends on where you live. Where you live have an impact on how you live your life. I'm from a rural part of the country. I represent a rural part of the country, Scotland District. And we have all of the challenges that are faced right across Barbados, certainly across the urban and suburban parts of Barbados. But we have those problems compounded by the fact that we have diminished infrastructure within the rural parts of Barbados, that our infrastructure is not up to par. That's why I'm glad I would thank the Prime Minister right here publicly for the efforts and the money that's being poured into the Scotland District, now into the Scotland District Road Repair Project, because the roads within that part of Barbados were atrocious, and that made it even more difficult for people living with disability. You talk about persons who are wheelchair bound. Maybe in the urban spaces, you can have the independence of leaving your house and you can wheel yourself across into other parts of your community, but in parts of the rural space, you can't. To come outside with a wheelchair, it will be a suicide attempt. It's a suicide mission because of the topography of the place. Sometimes people live all the way up in the back because of the conditions of some of the roads, and we're working on that. But in fact, it matters that some of them still remain in a pretty bad or pretty rough condition. You cannot. So that level of independence that you experience in some parts of Barbados, even with all the efforts, but you're good by the ministry and by government, there's still people who are still restricted primarily because of their physical environment. And though that's not to say that efforts are not being made everywhere. We see in town for sure, they have the sidewalk program. We're making sidewalks more accessible. Certainly in the wider Bridgetown area, they are more accessible to people with disabilities. I've seen they get off the tourist all around. We have Barbadians who would even brave to come into the city on their own, and they can navigate the city on their own, and that's all well and good. We're seeing evidence of that now also in parts of the rural space. I can speak to Belplain, where traditionally we would have had a lot of open box drains because of the amount of water that we get down there. But we have covered them all, and we have placed sidewalks on them so that persons can easily navigate that. Yes, we do it for everybody, but certainly persons in that area who have disabilities now can navigate a lot easier. Because if you live in an environment where whenever it rains heavily, the physical environment changes because some places washed away or slips away. If you are in a wheelchair or you're visually impaired, it becomes even more difficult for you, to navigate because the environment changes. You live in a urban space, you get out, you walk on hard concrete. That's not going to change. A concrete footpath is not going to change after a heavy rainfall. That's not going to change. But if you live in a rural space where you sometimes live in the back, and you live on a road made, a cat road perhaps, or a road that's made of clay, and you get some heavy rains, some days you come outside, the whole area changes. You now have to relearn that area. So you never get to be independent sometimes because of the space you're in. Also too, we've done a number of things for persons. Yes, we see the ramps when persons become disabled. We have National Disability Unit will come in and they will build ramps, they will build rails for persons so they can get in and out of the house. And that's all well and good when they're close to the front of the road. But we have situations where people have to trek up hills and houses are all the way in the back. If you understand, houses are in the back. You have your house at the front, you may have another house behind that, and you may have another house all the way back there. And what happens, and it's unfortunate, if you become disabled, you live in the back, sometimes you have to move out. You have to leave the house, go and live at a relative, go and rent somewhere else, because there's no accessibility to those houses in the back. So maybe we have to look at perhaps a footpath program where we can find all of our disabled persons and see what more can be done. Yes, ramps are are good, are well and good. What more can be done for those persons in rural spaces, especially where accessibility is an issue? Where perhaps if they can have a footpath built to alongside the houses to reach them in the back, they can better or more easily get out, in and out of their homes. Because in many cases, there are persons that you have to, every day you have, if they're leaving home, I mean, it's already difficult to get transportation to come into some of those areas. It's far, it's expensive because of the distance. But then you have the added issue of having to find people to lift you out. You can imagine having to lift a heavy person over 200 pounds, almost 300 pounds, lift down a hill, an incline. And you have to lift that person down to a waiting taxi or to a bus or something. And then you have to lift that person back in. Now, for you, the person is heavy, that's bad enough. But that person have to find somebody when they get out of the taxi. When they taxi pull up there and they get out, they got to find somebody in the neighborhood strong enough that can lift them all the way back up to where they live, all the way in the back. Because no wheelchair can be pushed up there because there's no footpath. There's no road. We're not asking for a road, because every place you cannot put a road, but some places you can certainly put a little footpath for persons like that they can get up in the back. So those are some things that I would love to see. I see a number of suggestions that are good, but that was one suggestion that I would like to see also. If we can look at, it wouldn't work in every instance, but where it can work, I'm sure that is something that we could look at. Now, there was mention about natural disasters. In terms of natural disaster, I'm a member of the St. Andrew DO. I'm also a member of the St. Andrew Disaster Response Team. And one of the things that we've done is that we've ensured that we have a profile of every disabled person within our communities. We need to know, even as MPs, we need to know who are disabled, where our disabled people are. We can find them when it's time to vote. We can find them. We have to find them when it's time, when there's disasters, when we hear of a system coming. We have to be able to find them the same way. Know where every one of them is. We need to know that. And it's important that each and every one of us go and do that profiling of our communities to see who they are and where they are, and not only where and who they are, but how we can help them in the event that there's a natural disaster and we have to move in there and get them out. Because there's some living by themselves, There's some that are very independent. They're living alone. They're happy to live alone. They're happy that they can continue to live alone. But when it comes to a natural disaster, all of a sudden they become very, very, very susceptible. They're extremely vulnerable to natural disasters. So we have to know where they are, and we have to be able to go in with a plan and extract them and get them someplace safe every time. So that's something that I would want to encourage my colleagues. I certainly have had to do it myself, and it's something that I am sure that no one here will have any difficulty doing. So that's just one thing. And just as I close, because I'm going to be brief, I want to speak to, as I said, I mentioned it before, but I mention it again because when we think about the Scotland Road Rehabilitation Program, we think about just accessibility for persons to come into the Scotland district. We think about it as from an economic perspective. Tourists will be able to come back and there will be increase in economic activity. And that's great, because all those things are expected. But we never really look at how it would impact our disabled community. We never look at the fact that now, for the first time, people in road space can go on a good, smooth road surface, and they can navigate themselves, whether it be with a wheelchair or prosthetic legs, because it's difficult to walk on uneven surfaces, even with prosthetic legs. Just this week, I saw a gentleman, he fell in my neighborhood because of the unevenness of the road. So persons can now, in their wheelchairs, even on their crutches, prosthetic legs, persons who are visually impaired, can now have a safer road surface on which to walk, to get around their communities, to get to church, to get to the various events in the community. These are all things that we are looking at also when we are repairing roads. You don't think about it, but you have to think about it, because when you go into the community, you meet these people, and you hear the struggles, you hear the concerns, and they're very happy to know that they can get to and fro now. They'll be able to move around in a more safe environment. The member for St. Michael Southeast would have mentioned that we are expecting more buses coming into Barbados, which would solve a big problem for us in the north, but would also solve some of the problems that are faced by those with disability, because one of the specs that we ensure that those buses would have was that they would have accessibility for persons with disabilities. You cannot, in a 2024, 2025 Barbados, bring a bus for public use and do not consider the disabled, because they are a very integral, a very important part of our society. They are. And I'm glad to hear that there are many of them who are contributing. There are many of them who have reached levels that some of us can only dream of. There are some of them who are doing extremely well. And I commend each and every one of them who have against all odds, it's proven that they can do anything that any of us here can do, and more than many. But we have, as much as possible, to remove every barrier, whether it be physical, whether it be cultural or social, any barrier, every barrier, from the way to ensure that they can live the best life possible in Barbados. So as I close, I just want to say, as we work towards nurturing our societies, we must focus on persons with disabilities with a view of helping them to better integrate into our societies, where a person with a disability is seen in no other way than any other person in the community. And with those few words, I want to once again commend the member for St. Michael South and the member for St. James North and their team for the good work they have done in putting together this policy.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the House be suspended for 10 minutes until 12:40 p.m.
Honourable member, the question is that this House be now suspended for 10 minutes until 12:40. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber is now suspended for 10 minutes.